In the shadows of crumbling republics and broken oaths, amidst the marble temples and blood-stained curias of Rome, history was writing its most fateful chapter. This is ages of war, where history lives again, not as dates and names, but as the cries of soldiers, the ambitions of rulers, and the collapse of civilizations. Today, we stand at the edge of Rome's greatest turning point, the last days of Julius Caesar, and the final breath of the Roman Republic. Rome was silent, but it was not at peace. The city had endured civil war, twice in a generation. The streets once filled with the proud cries of free men now echoed with the marching boots of soldiers loyal not to the Senate, but to individuals. Caesar had returned victorious from Gaul, then from Pharsalus, from Egypt, from Africa, and finally from Spain. The last opposition had been crushed. Pompey was dead, his allies scattered, his cause lost. The Senate still met, but its voice was hollow. Its dignity was an illusion. Power had shifted irrevocably. The Republic was still alive in name, but its lifeblood now ran through one man, Gaius Julius Caesar. To the people, he was a savior, bringer of grain, protector of peace, champion of the poor. To the veterans, he was a god, leader of men, the general who shared their bread, marched in the mud, and never asked what he would not do himself. But to the old elite, he was a tyrant in disguise, cloaked not in regal garb, but in popularity. When Caesar was named Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life, the air thickened with foreboding. It was not just a title, it was a death sentence for the Republic. Rome had once driven out kings and vowed never to kneel again. And yet, there he stood in the Forum, flanked by lictors, his image on coins, statues erected in his honor, the calendar rewritten in his name. Julius, the month, the man. But Caesar was more complex than ambition alone. He reformed debt laws, expanded the Senate with provincials, launched building programs, and planned massive projects, draining the marshes, expanding the empire into Parthia, even recutting the Tiber. He pardoned enemies who had fought against him, restoring their property, their titles, their lives. It was this mercy, so rare in Roman politics, that became his greatest weakness. For those he pardoned, those he welcomed back into his fold, now plotted his end. In villas beyond the city walls, behind locked doors, daggers were sharpened not in fury, but in calculation. Among the conspirators were over 60 senators, patricians, ex-consuls, praetors, all fearful of one truth. Caesar had made the Republic obsolete. The heart of the conspiracy beat in Marcus Junius Brutus, a man Caesar trusted as a friend, perhaps even as a son. Brutus was no mere traitor. He was a symbol, the ghost of the first Brutus, who had cast down the last king of Rome, hovered over him like an ancestral curse. Torn between blood and belief, Brutus chose the past. Alongside him was Cassius, sharper, angrier, more desperate, a man driven by principle and personal grievance. Together, they moved carefully, secretly, patiently. The plan was to strike at the heart of power, not with legions, but with steel and theater. It would not be a coup, but a sacrifice, a ritual cleansing of tyranny. They would kill Caesar in the open, in the Senate, before the eyes of Rome. As the fated day approached, omens filled the air. Strange lights flickered in the night. Birds flew backward. The haruspices warned of catastrophe. A soothsayer, passing Caesar on the Via Sacra, whispered, "Beware the Ides of March." Caesar laughed. His wife Calpurnia, sleepless and haunted, dreamed of blood pouring from the walls of their home, of statues weeping, of Rome burning. She pleaded with him not to go to the Senate that morning. For a moment, Caesar hesitated. He considered staying home. But then Decimus Brutus, one of the conspirators, arrived with mocking reassurances. The Senate waited. The people expected him. Would Caesar show fear? And so, wrapped in his purple toga, he stepped into the morning light. No guards accompanied him, only trust. He made his way to the theater of Pompey, where the Senate was meeting temporarily. How cruel, how poetic, that Caesar's death would come beneath the statue of his former enemy. Destiny, it seemed, had a sense of irony. The conspirators gathered early, waiting like actors before a tragedy. As Caesar entered the Curia, they surrounded him. One by one, they approached, each with a petition. A staged distraction. Tullius Cimber grabbed Caesar's toga as the signal. Then came the steel. The first blow struck him in the shoulder. Casca, trembling, shouted for help. "Brother, help me!" More blades followed. Caesar staggered, stunned, betrayed, his gaze darting in disbelief. Then he saw Brutus. In that eternal moment, words slipped from Caesar's lips, not with rage, but with sorrow. Et2, brute, and then silence. He fell at the base of Pompey's statue, blood pooling across the floor, staining the very seat of the Republic. 23 wounds marked his flesh, but it was the wound in his heart that truly killed him. The deed was done. But there was no triumph. The assassins stood in stunned silence, their togas soaked in blood, their vision of liberty shattered by the quiet of the chamber. They had expected Rome to rejoice, to welcome their act as noble salvation. Instead, the city recoiled in horror. The people did not cheer. They wailed. Veterans wept. Citizens mourned. The man they loved was dead, and those who killed him had no army, no plan, no future. Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal ally, quickly seized the moment. At Caesar's funeral, he read the will. Caesar had left money to every Roman citizen. He had given public parks to the people. And when Antony lifted the blood-stained toga before the crowd, showing the very tears and wounds that had ended his life, fury exploded. The city rioted. The Senate panicked. The conspirators fled. Brutus and Cassius escaped eastward, hoping to raise legions and rally the old cause. But their time was already over. Caesar's true heir had already stepped into history. Gaius Octavius, just 19 years old, arrived in Rome, named in Caesar's will as his adopted son and heir. Few had noticed him before, but now he claimed the mantle of Caesar, the loyalty of legions, and the attention of Rome. The tides turned swiftly. Octavian, Antony, and Lepidus formed the Second Triumvirate. Together, they hunted the assassins of Caesar with ruthless efficiency. Proscriptions filled the streets with heads on pikes. Cicero, who had praised the Republic, died with his tongue cut out. At the Battle of Philippi in 42 BCE, the final fate of Brutus and Cassius was sealed. Defeated, they fell by their own hands. Yet the alliance would not last. Antony sought power in the east, allying with Cleopatra in Alexandria. Octavian remained in Rome, consolidating his base. Their final clash came at the Battle of Actium, a naval conflict that decided the fate of the world. Antony and Cleopatra were defeated. Their suicides marked the end of the Republic's last defenders. Octavian returned to Rome, not as a general, but as a savior. The Senate, exhausted and broken, offered him titles. He refused kingship but accepted princeps, first citizen. In time, he became Augustus, and the Republic was gone. What Brutus and the conspirators had tried to save, they had destroyed. What they hoped to restore, they buried. They killed a man but gave birth to an empire. Julius Caesar did not become king, but his death made it possible for emperors to rise. His life was the bridge between the old world and the new. His death was the price of transition. The Ides of March echo not as a triumph of freedom, but as a warning that liberty once lost is not easily reclaimed, that power once centralized does not disperse willingly, and that in the name of virtue, men may unwittingly hasten the fall of the very ideals they defend. Thank you for walking with us through one of history's most fateful hours. This is Ages of War, If you found meaning in this story, if you wish to hear more of the turning points that shaped civilizations, subscribe to the channel and join us as